Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome to our Beyond the Headlines discussion about Project Pascalis. I'm John Boyette, Executive Editor of the Aiken Standard, and I'm joined by Holly Kemp, our news editor, and Matthew Christian, who is our city government reporter. So thank you everybody for tuning in today to talk about this lively topic. And let me start by saying we know there's a lot of interest in this project, and the Aiken Standard is committed to covering this issue from all sides. We've reported on it since its inception, and we've tried to follow it through all the meetings and the different actions that have been going on. So, but there's a lot to digest, and stay tuned for more as we plan to dig deeper into Project Pascalis. So if you have questions, we've already received a number of those. You can submit those. We'll check those out. But let's get started with Holly. And Holly's been at the newspaper longer than Matthew and I. So she's seen a few proposals about the downtown Aiken during her time in the paper. And give us a little bit of a history and context on how we arrived at Project Pascalis.
Well, where to start with Project Pascalis? I have been doing some research in preparation for our discussions. So just to start off with, Project Pascalis is the $75 million downtown Aiken redevelopment project being shepherded by the Aiken Municipal Development Commission. The plans call for a new hotel, apartments, and parking garage along the Richland Avenue corridor in downtown Aiken between Lawrence and Newberry Streets, as well as redeveloping and expanding the old Aiken Municipal Building on Park Avenue into a conference center. The city has already engaged a developer, which is RPM Development Partners, and it also features a group of Aiken investors. And after much community feedback, the developer's most recent plans call for the project call for Hotel Aiken to be demolished and a new 100-room hotel built with the rooftop bar. And at the corner of Richland Avenue and Newberry Street, plans call for a 117-unit, 5-story apartment building with the parking deck inside of it to be built. So that structure would feature new commercial offerings, and at the corner of Richland and B Lane and along Newberry Street. And the current plans also call for 10 feet of the historic former C.C. Johnson's Drugstore facade to remain, to keep some history alive with the project. Now, the current project has its roots in multiple visions of downtown Aiken redevelopment efforts. I don't have enough time today to share every turn of the screw in the Aiken Standard's coverage of these topics, but I can share a quick and extremely brief timeline of events that got us to where we are now with Project Pascalis. So to begin with, when I was doing my research, I counted that the Aiken Standard has written over 100 articles in the past 5 years, just talking about Hotel Aiken redevelopment. And we've written even more articles than that when you go back further to 2015, when the city first started talking about increasing the maximum height for buildings due to the previous owners of Hotel Aiken, the Shaw family, wanting to develop the hotel and requesting the maximum height be increased from 50 feet to 75 feet. That idea faced much community criticism and pushback, much like what's happening with today's Project Pascalis project. And ultimately, the height increase was only increased to 55 feet from 50 feet back in 2015. So I'd like to really quickly hit the highlights from 2015 to 2022, where we are now. In 2015, city leaders went on an aspirational cities tour that was sponsored by the Chamber. They visited Greenville, South Carolina, Raleigh, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to help spark conversation and refocus development efforts in Aiken. So this effort has been going on a long time. We can fast forward to 2017. People new to the area might not know about this, but the city of Aiken announced a downtown redevelopment project called the Renaissance back then in 2017. And it was a public-private development effort targeting properties in downtown Aiken. It did include a parking garage to be located at Richland and Newberry with retail integrated into the structure. However, that idea faced a lot of community criticism and pushback, and the city ultimately had to go back to the drawing board. So after the Renaissance, when the plan did not come to fruition, the city council ended up naming a new city manager. And in 2019, the Aiken City Council stood up the Aiken Municipal Development Commission, which was a new body. And the commission has been described as a local catalyst in a business-minded body with independent powers and a sense of autonomy. Fast forward to 2020, the work on Hotel Aiken ceased. The owners really were not able to predict the restart dates. And during that time, the community became really concerned about the safety of the old hotel in the middle of the downtown area. And then we get to last fall, at the end of 2021, the Aiken Municipal Development Commission received $10 million in funding to begin land banking efforts in the Parkway District. And they were able to approve purchase of the properties that are now being involved in Project Pascalis for $9.5 million. Let's see. The commission unveiled the project in December of last year at the Aiken Chamber breakfast, and described that an initial purchase and sale agreement with RPM which was led by Rains Development of Florence and featuring Lapp Purser and Associates of Charleston, opened the door for a due diligence period, and they set a summer 2022 deadline for a master development agreement, which is around the time frame that we are right now. So negotiations are still ongoing and continuing. This year in 2022, the developers have been working closely with the Aiken Design Review Board, which is a semi-judicial panel tasked with preserving and elevating the city's historic features. Several public input meetings have been held, and many residents have spoken for and against the project, and the Aiken Standard's been there covering it. In May of this year, a new group called the Do It Right Alliance gathered in the downtown Aiken Horse District, and they shared their thoughts and started to organize a movement on saving the history and charm of Aiken during this project. And they've really, the residents have really been making an impact because the designs continue to change. So the developers have been listening, changes have been happening, and this project's literally been years in the making. So it's got a lot of community interest right now.
Okay, thank you, Holly. That was very informative and detailed. So Matthew, now it's your turn. There's already been one lawsuit filed about the project, and the Do It Right Alliance, I believe, has said that previously said they plan to take legal action. So if that happens, what does that mean for Project Pascalis?
Well, to give you the old legal answer, which is it depends, and it really depends on three things. One, what the Do It Right Alliance would allege in a hypothetical lawsuit. Two, what the court would say about the lawsuit. And then three, what the city's response to that lawsuit would be. The Do It Right Alliance could hypothetically ask for a temporary restraining order or a temporary injunction to prevent progress from being made on Project Pascalis, depending on the outcome of the lawsuit. They could also ask for a permanent injunction to stop the project completely. But a lot of that would depend on what the lawsuit looked like and what the court and a jury would hypothetically decide.
So realistically, this could be, several years in the making if there is legal action, and depending on what happens in the courts.
It could be multiple years. The other part of this is a lot of the laws that are involved in the project that are supposedly involved, like the redevelopment codes and things like that, are not really well tested parts of law. So a court would probably be writing its decisions based on nothing other than just its interpretation of the law, which means it could go up to the Court of Appeals and the South Carolina Supreme Court before it ultimately gets decided.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we did receive a lot of questions in advance. People who had registered submitted a bunch of questions, and we tried to go through some of those and pick a few to answer in our time frame. So we're going to go to Holly next. And why does downtown Aiken need 117 apartments, and who are the prospective tenants for those?
Okay, so why does Aiken need apartments? This is something that the city has reviewed multiple times. There are multiple studies that the city's commission and that have said that more housing options are needed in the city limits of Aiken. Most recently, a study was released in 2021, last year, and it was prepared for the city by AECOM. And it recommended that the city should work to retain and attract residents. So one specifically younger working class residents in the workforce. And it also recommended to identify key geographic areas for growth and renewal, leverage major investments and partnerships, utilize equestrian heritage, and enhance or beautify the city's gateways. So that full study has been adopted by the city as a blueprint for redevelopment efforts, and it does recommend more apartments are needed in the downtown area as well as within the city limits. So this particular project is 117, and the apartments are planned to wrap around a parking deck. And the designs are not final yet, so nothing is set in stone still. But we do know that the price of these apartments are to be market rate apartments. We actually haven't seen what that means for the actual pricing, but they've said that they'll be market rate apartments.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, back to Matthew. It's your turn again. Tell us a little bit about how the bidding process works in selecting a developer. And many folks want to know if a request for proposal was issued and if there was a competitive bidding process.
Okay, so the city of Aiken has worked with two different developers. I think, as most people would probably know, the city has worked with two different developers on the project. The first one being WTC, the current one being RPM. WTC came in when they first began to do the project, and for whatever reason, they left. They left, but before they left, they went ahead and purchased several properties in downtown Aiken that the city needed to that are currently part of Project Pascalis. When WTC left, they took the city went ahead and purchased those options or acquired those options through the Chamber of Commerce to be able to get the properties that are now part of Project Pascalis. And then RPM came in. It's Rains. I think there's an architectural firm in there. Massey's and Ray Massey, a local attorney's in there, and Lat Purser is also in there. Basically, as I understand it, Rains would operate the hotel, Lat Purser would operate the apartments, and the convention center / conference center will be operated by the people that currently operate Newberry Hall.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Holly, let's tackle a fun one that's got a lot of people talking. Why does downtown Aiken need a parking garage?
John, you're giving me all the fun ones today.
Yeah, I'm giving you all the tough ones.
So why does Aiken need a parking garage? I'm going to answer this by what the city has said why there's a need for a parking garage. According to the city, there's no current need for a parking garage, but the creation of apartments, a hotel, and a larger event space will create parking demand that current on-street parking cannot accommodate. And that is a quote from the city in their materials where they were looking for developers to work on the project. So the proposed parking garage will have no fewer than 300 spaces. I think the current one has over 380 spaces in the current the plans that do keep changing some. The garage will be constructed by the developer and purchased and operated by the city when it's complete. And the city has also provided parking and traffic studies that are publicly available. That's a big question that we've heard people ask is, is there a need for it? Have any studies been done? And studies have been done, and they're actually available to view on the Aiken Municipal Development Commission's website. So if someone's interested, they can go on there and try and look at these statistics and see what those studies say about the need for a parking deck in that location with the plans that are proposed right now.
I just know from personal experience that if I could try to go to eat at a downtown restaurant or go to a store down there, sometimes I have to circle the block to get a close by parking spot. I think it's probably a convenience issue for a lot of people. They don't want to walk more than a block or a couple of blocks.
Yeah, it can be a very subjective topic. So it kind of depends on who you are and what your lifestyle is like. To me, but according to what the city is saying, there will be a need for a deck once all of the redevelopment has been completed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Matthew, a lot of people have been concerned about the public's ability to have input on this project. And I know there's been at least 2 different meetings that were opportunities to give some input, one with the developers and then one, or they got to hear proposals. And then they had after they had the Aiken Downtown Development Association, they had an event at Newberry Hall where they offered the chance to give some feedback. So what kind of steps are being taken to ensure transparency by all the city officials?
Well, first of all, the first step is the AMDC website. There's, like Holly said, there's tons of studies and information about the project on there. I think there's actually some minutes and proposed designs on there as well. There's also pardon me for a second. There's also the public meetings that have been held, like the design review board and the AMDC meetings, where people can observe the design review board giving feedback and whatnot like that. When I was in Florence covering government politics over there was a similar project, and none of this happened. None of this was public. It was all done in executive session. They came out with the design, signed the master development agreement, and then sent the proposed designs to the design review board for approval. None of the design review board got to put input on there. The Municipal Development Commission, they don't really have one in Florence, that really wasn't involved. But there really wasn't, there's really a lot more transparency here than there was for a similar project in Florence.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go back to Holly. A lot of folks are concerned that Hotel Aiken would be demolished if certain conditions are met with the developers. Holly, give us a little bit of a history of Hotel Aiken and why it's important to downtown Aiken.
Okay, so I found again, I'm going to try to keep this brief history of the hotel, but the hotel's been around for over like 120 years, so it's seen a lot of things. The hotel, which has had a handful of proprietors during its lifespan, was first owned by Henry Hahn. So the first iteration of the building, according to an 1898 fire insurance map, was built in the late Victorian Romanesque style, and the 1929 hotel update introduced a heavy colonial revival touches and solidified the hotel's current structure. The original building ran 110 feet along Richland Avenue and 51 feet along Lawrence Street. And Hahn used the ground floor to showcase his grocery business, according to this history. In 1915, the hotel building became home to the earliest and longest continuously operated African-American owned business in the Aiken area. In 2016, the hotel was known as the Owell Hotel. I may be pronouncing that wrong. And an insurance map shows the building attaining its current footprint in 1918. And in 1922, the building became the Aiken Hotel, and the hotel played a major role in the Roaring Twenties social scene. It welcomed visitors of distinction and social prominence during the winter colony social sessions in Aiken. And 7 years later, following an extensive renovation, the hotel was given another name, the Commercial Hotel. And we've seen pictures of that hotel in old editions of the Aiken Standard. And the hotel's historic elevator was installed that year. And by the turn of the century, the hotel had undergone several other name and building changes. Shaw Investments eventually brought back the Hotel Aiken moniker in 2001 upon their purchase of the property, and they owned it until it was purchased by the Aiken Municipal Development Commission for this project. So
Okay.
now, when you're asking about why is it important historically to Aiken, that was just kind of a rundown of the history of the building's actual history. But when you start to bring up the topic in social circles, many people have many other reasons about why it's important for Aiken.
You know, those of us that are a certain age and grew up in Aiken, like myself, we remember going there as young people and, you know, enjoying the Aiken nightlife scene back in the day. So,
Yeah.
you know, it has a lot of nostalgic value for a lot of people.
Well, and
Sorry,
sorry,
Matt, you go.
at the design review board meeting last week, one of the members talked about, I think it was Katie Lipscomb, talked about not knowing that she was home in Aiken until she saw the hotel at the corner of Richland and Lawrence Street. So that kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea of what the Hotel Aiken means. It's kind of a symbol, or that block is kind of a symbol of Aiken to some people.
Good point. So speaking of design review board, Matthew, you reported the last couple of days that they were going to meet to consider demolition of, you know, several properties in that area, but that meeting has been put on hold. I think the application was withdrawn. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I talked to Tim O'Brien yesterday, and Tim said that the meeting had been postponed because the meeting was scheduled to take place on July 5th in the evening. That's a big weekend, big week for vacation for people all across the United States. So not a lot of people are going to be here to be able to comment. And so they wanted to move it to a later date to allow for people to be able to attend and comment. And he also mentioned some unspecified health and COVID-19 concerns. He said he didn't really want to get into those because of for HIPAA reasons, but those were the two reasons that he gave for moving that.
Okay, well, thank you for that update.
He also did not say when the meeting would be rescheduled yet.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah.
So Matthew, I'm gonna give you another one. So we're gonna give Holly a break here. What types of groups would use the proposed conference center, and how often do you think it would be in use, or what are the officials saying about that?
To be honest with you, I just came onto the coverage of the Project Pascalis, so I haven't really done a lot of research in terms of who would use Project Pascalis. They have talked about having different business meetings and whatnot at the conference center, and that they designed it in such a way that people would have to exit the conference center and walk along the alley in Richland and Lawrence to increase foot traffic and provide customers for the businesses in that area as well.
Yeah, I think the thought is that, you know, Savannah River site, you know, typically has a lot of conferences or events that, you know, that could be a potential, you know, group that would use that facility a lot.
Well, and then the other potential possibility is there's lots of high-powered people that love to go to the Masters every year, and they could maybe schedule some meetings in Aiken to coincide with their trip to Augusta as well, because they would have a very convenient place to stay and also park their vehicles and whatnot should the project go forward.
Okay, good point. We'll stick with Matthew, give him one more here before we jump back on Holly, but So how does Project Pascalis impact the proposed sale of the old Aiken County Hospital and its plans for redevelopment?
As far as I know, there's not really that much of an impact. We haven't yet learned the name of the new developer for the hotel, for the former hospital slash county administrative buildings over on Richland. And so we don't necessarily know if the developer is the same or not. But as far as I know, it wouldn't be the same. In the in the old hospital project, the city basically has just been asked to rezone the property. They just approved that at their on first reading at their meeting on Monday. And at the meeting and with the Project Pascalis, they'd be asked to own and operate a parking deck and the conference center. They've already said that they'll turn the operation of the conference center over to Newgray Hall though. So there shouldn't be that much of an overlap there.
Okay. Holly, we're going to go back to you. Since you talked about parking, one of our questions that's been submitted since we started was, have there been any studies done on the dangers of parking decks, parking garages? There's a lot of, they get a bad rap for, being a place where crime happens.
Mhm. I'm not sure if any have been done on the dangers of parking garages, but that's something that we can ask and see what we're told, see what we can find out. I don't recall anything specifically talking about something studying it being dangerous, but I've definitely heard that same thought process before, and it's something we can ask in our reporting.
Okay. All right. Matthew, you got an assignment, so.
Oh, I'll get right on that.
We've gotten so many good questions about this project for this this chat today, so it's been a great process.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to put you on the spot. A couple of questions have come in about the design review board, and was it postponed or was the application withdrawn? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I can only repeat what Tim O'Brien told me, that they have postponed the meeting because of the that week being a very big week for vacations and also for health reasons. It's possible that the city could have not had a postponed sign, so they just put withdrawn on the sign. It's also possible they could be slightly updating the design based on feedback they got at the design review board meeting the other day. But all this stuff is kind of between the city and the developer, and there's not necessarily really a way for us to find out, because even if you send out a FOIA request, they're going to say it's economic development matters, and so there's not really a way to get any information on that. It's just kind of like hurry up and wait for us.
Okay. There was another question that we got, and some of the pre-questions was asking about, sort of the tax ramifications and the cost to the citizens of Aiken. Can either one of y'all elaborate on that a little bit, or?
Well, I can tell you that the city of Aiken hasn't raised their property tax millage since 1989. I can tell you that that's 33 years ago, because I was actually born in 1988. So that's a date I kind of remember. So they haven't raised their property tax millage. The other thing is Aiken's seen a lot of growth, particularly over the between 2010 and 2020. And because of that growth, you don't have to raise the property tax millage, because you have more and more people coming in, which keeps raising the property values. So the city's getting more money that way. Also, these are economic development bonds. Usually the city would have some sort of secondary source of revenue to pay for those, not necessarily based on property taxes, to be able to do that.
I do know that the hospitality tax is being used in funding. And then we've also, I didn't mention during my brief recap of history about how the part of the plutonium settlement money that the state of South Carolina was awarded is going to the city of Aiken, and the city's decided that it wants to use part of their money for downtown redevelopment projects. So that money will also help with the funding of what's being proposed.
And that's another thing that kind of makes Project Pascalis unique compared to a lot of other cities in South Carolina, because most cities, in order to fund downtown redevelopment, have to establish TIF districts and things like that, where they have to get special districts and put the money that they get from that back into that district. And it gets really, really complicated very quickly. With the plutonium money coming in, the city is able to take to really kind of fund all of this without having to go through all of that process. So it's a very it's a very kind of once in a lifetime kind of thing for both the state and Aiken because of the plutonium money.
There's been a couple of questions, and I'll try to answer these myself. We're being asked, what kind of, watchdog journalism or, FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests that we might file. And yes, we are planning on looking into doing some of that. As Matthew indicated, he is our third reporter to be on this story since November. We had Colin Demarest, who was covering it in the beginning. And then when Colin left, Landon Stamper took over the city government role. And now Landon left earlier this month. So, Matthew has now been forced into duty. So he's doing a good job. But like he said, he's new to it. And we do plan on doing some more digging into this. I've talked to different city officials, and they've admitted to me, pretty much that, this project, this scope and size, that they think that, probably some missteps have happened and some things that, that they like to do differently. I think we can all agree that that's probably accurate. We think this is a very important topic. Obviously, we've got, dozens of people on this Zoom call in the middle of the day on a weekday, and it's got a lot of good questions, and we're committed to, like I said in the beginning, we're committed to following this story and reporting on it from all the angles that we can find, and we appreciate all of your input. So let's we're going over our time here a little bit, so let's we got one more in, and I'm not sure if Holly is prepared for this, but Holly, you're asked, could you talk a little bit more about the history of the Johnson Drugstore and its importance to the city's racial history?
I can talk briefly about what I remember from we did a story a few years ago about the Johnson's Drugstore, CC Johnson's Drugstore's role in the Green Book of South Carolina, which was a book that pointed people to safe places for African Americans to be able to stay when they were traveling. And because back, in the past, people were not welcome everywhere. And so the Green Book was a trusted source that people could stay in. The Johnson's Drugstore was noted in that travel guide for people to be able to know that they could come to Aiken and have a safe place to go. And so that is one of the things that I remember from that story. And I know that that's one of the items in the plans that a lot of community members really want that block not to be demolished because of the history of that building and the family history that comes along with it. And the developers have kind of come up with a compromise right now to keep the first 10 feet of the building and have incorporated it into the design of the retail and apartment building parking deck structure. And that's what the current design shows. Now, these designs have been changing a lot this year. They've gone through so many evolutions. So I expect them to change again. What they may change to, I don't know. But I have seen that the developer's been willing to try to keep in display some of the history of Aiken to an extent. It may not be enough for some people, but that is that parcel of land definitely has some long history in Aiken for the African American community.
All right. Well, I think we've gone over our allotted time, so let's wrap it up, Matthew, and just give me a little brief what the future holds. What are the next steps for Project Pascalis, and what do we think is going to happen down the road?
Well, the next step is for the designs to be approved by the design review board. And then following that, the city will be able to enter into, or the AMDC or the city will be able to enter into a master development agreement with the developer of the project, depending on whether those designs are approved or not. As to ultimately what those designs look like Holly said, we don't know. They could change. They could be very different tomorrow than they are today. And what the master development agreement looks like, we don't know. Again, that's subject to negotiations, and as soon as we can get our hands on that, we'll be glad to definitely write a story about that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Holly and Matthew, for your insight, and thank all the participants today for joining us and talking about this important topic. I believe you just got a message from our company to show you how to sign up for our newsletters, and if you'd like to subscribe, we'd appreciate that as well. We are looking forward to covering this down the road and see what happens in the future, and perhaps we could come back in a couple of months and do another one of these and have some more news to share.
I will look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.